And then I turned back and I ran towards the tree line. And as I run towards the tree line, this guy steps out, takes the gun to aim, and I throw the tomahawk and take him out. I get up to where he is and I remove the tomahawk, and I didn't search the forest line right away. And I looked back to make sure Jess was running, and I could still see the image in my head. She had one of the kids in her arm and another one in their hand, and she was just running away. And I see them just carrying us out of here. And so she took off, and then I turn around to go basically take on the next target. And I felt this opening in my head, just this like release, this air, this like opening. And all of a sudden I was just floating above my body.
I am so blessed to bring you Joe Hehn today. Welcome to the show, Joe. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you. You and I actually have a little bit in common.
Yeah. Thank you for having me, Tia. And I'm really excited too. And again, it's weird when people connect on something that's so profound in their life and soul stirring, and kind of serves as a catalyst for a spiritual revolution, kind of as we discussed. But when you look back at losing somebody that you loved so dearly, you start seeing what they meant for you, but also what that did for you moving on and kind of evolving and growing. And so it's kind of weird sometimes talking about this, but I feel like with somebody like yourself, you totally get it. I totally get it. So kind of magical
It is.
in a
It's
sense.
very magical. And I love what you're doing. You've taken a big tragedy, huge tragedy in your life, and you've really shifted it around to make it into a blessing for other people. And that's so important when people can do that and you're sharing and helping other people change their lives. So what happened? Your wife, Jessica Marie, she passed away. And
Yeah.
it wasn't just an event that changed your um hold on. It wasn't just okay, and so this was an event that was just a little bit more than an apocalyptic event for you. It actually
Yeah.
shifted you into a whole new reality, which I can relate to. And can you tell me about Jessica and how did she pass?
So we were living together for a while. We had met in 2003, actually, and then we were dating. We were both bartenders for a long time and having a grand old life together, celebrating a lot of fun and friendships, and just kind of partying in Chicago. We were both bartenders for a while. And then things for us got more serious. We got engaged and we got married in 2011. And then 2012, uh, she found a little lump in her neck and got it checked out, and it was through biopsy, and then it was discovered to be lung cancer. And so that basically ignited in a whole new season of life, because it was stage 3B or 4. They weren't sure, but it had spread from her lungs outside of that. And so we just kind of started going around trying to look for treatment options, because we didn't want to do the traditional chemo and radiation. And we owned a health and wellness business at the time. So we were really holistically minded. That was all Jessica's like love and passion. She ignited that later in her life, and she just loved helping people. And in Chicago, people needed the help to learn how to like eat healthy and maintain healthy lifestyles. So that was kind of a tether for us throughout the course of trying to seek treatment, is that we didn't want to do anything that was just going to bomb her body with toxins and chemicals and make her very, very sick and everything. So we were trying to evade chemotherapy. So we went on this journey for a couple months looking for stuff, traveling, and then we found something that just kind of magically fell in her lap. She happened to be like one out of 10,000 people that was able to get this certain treatment. And we were in Texas at the time, and the treatment was actually back in Chicago. So that was like my first introduction to synchronicities of things kind of like lining up that seemed way beyond circumstantial and coincidental rather. And so we went back to Chicago, started that gene targeted therapy, and it was, no hair loss, not getting her sick, everything that we wanted. And she was still trying to do stuff to help her out mentally and emotionally. It was still a tremendous battle. And she was told that she was in remission one day, and we were insanely happy, of course, like anybody would be. and then kind of went on living on our lives. I was working at a corporate environment in a high end boutique on Michigan Avenue, doing very well professionally. And then one day she got sick, and we're like, what's going on? Maybe you have food poisoning. We took her to the hospital, and they later discovered like dozens of tumors in her brain. So the drug had worked, but it didn't penetrate the blood-brain barrier. So the cancer went to where it could thrive, which was her brain. And so from then, what we thought before was like, hey, we're good, we're in remission, and we had a hard challenge and a really emotionally, spiritually kind of difficult time. Now this was like the apocalypse because we had to usher her to the hospital, like send her emergently to another hospital for life-saving brain surgery because these tumors were affecting her function. And so they didn't know if she was going to make it through that, but she did. And then that ignited like the new season where we moved out of our apartment in with my folks. And basically, I became her full-time caretaker. My parents were a tremendous help, and I was still having the corporate job, and we kind of shelved the health and wellness business. And from then on, it was just this crazy emotional, mental, spiritual battle of always like standing firm and trying to be very positive for her. But behind the curtains, I was like breaking down because we're constantly fighting these waves of like mortality, things that would just happen and just throw us and derail off any kind of progress. And it's like that with cancer, all these just bad things happening. And so we were making progress and then not making progress and not. So it's back and forth, and it just such an anxiety riddled experience. But one thing it did is, as a husband and as a wife and as a couple, it kind of incinerates all the surface grievances that you may have had for prior to that. You know, me being critical, her being short, or vice versa, and whatever. All that stuff just gets blown away and obliterated, and you're there and you're able to like connect on this insanely soulful, deep, loving way. And in this space that you really didn't have before because you're facing this looming death in a sense, this possibility, this potentiality. And it's such a huge gravity and weight, and it's so loud and it takes so much of your bandwidth. And so you're here and you're looking at each other knowing that the love is there. And so I feel like we really fused on a soulful level through our love, through that experience. And I honestly just never really thought that she was going to pass away. I just thought this is the worst time ever, but we're going to get through it. And, you know, you would have the thoughts of the worst thing happening, but you displace it kind of like, you know, a mouse coming in through your doorstep. You'd be like, shoot, get out of here, you know, and chase it away because you just didn't want that energy and everything in your mind. And then for her, I was trying to be her knight, you know, because I was carrying her, bathing her, feeding her, just taking care of her, and then emotionally and physically, spiritually, trying to empower her that everything's going to be all right because she's sick and she's weak, and you're trying to be positive, and you're really up against the wall there with all the difficulty. So it was a tremendously challenging season. And then one day things got real bad, and we had to rush her to the emergency room, which we had done probably half a dozen times before that. I had spent 60 nights in the hospital with her, going straight to work from there and coming back. It was just a circus. But this time it was just very serious, and they had to induce a coma. And then 3 days later, we're standing in the room of the ICU. She's the most severe case in the entire hospital in Chicago, very busy hospital. And they told us, the doctor came up to me and he's like, she's not in there anymore. And so I took hours and hours and hours to kind of make my peace and beg her not to leave and pray to God not for this to happen and just prepare. And it's that typical hospital scene where you got the stark white bed sheets and the beeping monitors and the dim lights and the family already mourning, encircling the bed. And we did, and we prayed over her and then said goodbye. And it was a very long, drawn out process, but you have to really kind of prepare when you're taking somebody off life support and it's your love, your wife. It's not an easy decision and it's not an easy action. So we took our time to prepare and eventually said goodbye. And then on the car ride home, I asked my parents, I was in the back of their car. It was, I don't know, 5, 6 o'clock in the morning. I said, what time did she pass? And then my dad goes, 3:25, like without hesitation. He's like, 3:25. And I go, really? 3:25? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, are you sure? He's like, yeah. And my mom and dad are like, why? I'm like, that's our wedding anniversary, March 25th. And it was the first sign I got from her that something's amiss, that there's more to what's happening that meets the eye. And so I went home and basically experienced my own little apocalypse and just kind of like cocooned myself in bed for a day or two because it's just such a surreal thing to like come back to this house where it was such this zoo, this crazy, frantic kind of like place of healing and empowerment and encouragement and love. But you were so busy doing 50,000 things a day to try to take care of her and everything. And you come back and it's just like nothingness. And you see that big empty brown chair that she used to sit in. And everything was just so loud. And the quiet was so loud and the juxtaposition between the two different environments. And so I settled. And then people obviously knew, a lot of people's family were there and people were reaching out to me, giving me condolences and we were starting to prepare. And I would also get messages on her phone. So her phone was still active. Of course, you know, think to even like, oh, I got to turn off her phone. Like it's not a thing. So we just had her cell phone and people would reach out once in a while to check up on her or me. Because some people didn't know, living all over the world, you have friends and everything. And so one time that happened, and it was this friend of hers called Tanya. And she's like, hey, honey, I'm checking in on you. How you doing? Thinking that she was speaking to Jess. And I had to tell her, I'm so sorry to let you know. Jess passed a few days ago. She's like, okay, this is going to sound really strange, but I'm actually a spiritual medium and I'm friends with Jess. Like we work together. And I believe that she's coming to me to talk to you. So my very male analytical mind is like, this is nonsense. This is crazy. But my grieving, soulful heart was like, tell me everything. Tell me more. Like, what did she have to say? And so I got on the phone with this woman and she kind of like confirmed these things that she could not know. And I know people could be like, well, Facebook and this, that, and the other. She would just tell me stuff that just Jess and I really knew. And she wasn't asking for money. She's just like, Jess is a friend of mine and I'm supposed to be talking to you. And I'm a psychic. I'm a medium. And this is what my purpose is. I'm not trying to do this for a business and everything. She wasn't saying that to me, but she was just going right into trying to help me out. And so I was like, well, what does Jess have to say? And she's like, well, she wants you to write a book to tell a story. That didn't make any sense to me. So that was the very first message. And I go, okay. And what else? And she's like, well, she wants you to read a book. I go, okay, what book? And she's like, she wants you to read The Afterlife of Billy Fingers. And that book, if people are not familiar, is about a brother and a sister. And the brother has a really, really hard life, Billy, and he's in and out of addiction treatment and hospitals. And he just really struggles through his life. And his sister's a little bit more stable, quite a bit more stable. And he ends up tragically passing away. But then he communicates to his sister afterwards, just showing up as like a voice or like an intercom voice almost. And he'll sometimes appear and manifest in form. And he basically describes what is going on with her in her life, but more so what is happening in the afterlife. And so I'm reading this book a few days after Jess passed away, and it is excruciatingly hard because it's just this reminder that she's gone. So it took a while, but I basically read that book while I was preparing to leave my life in a sense. Everything I knew, I quit my job. Stuff was all in storage. And I determined that I wanted to go travel the world and volunteer and soul search and heal and just try to make some sense of my new plight because I felt super scammed. I felt like my entire life was ripped away from me because it was in my perspective at that time. You have this soulful bond with your wife and your business partners, your lovers, your best friends, your husband and wife, and you have all of that, which is such a huge part of your identity of this woman being this to you, but also you being this for her, being the husband, being the best friend, being the business partner, and all that was gone in a second when we took her off life support. So I felt left with like nothing. Yeah, I was also like a brother and a son, but that doesn't hold a lot of weight when you have your own values and self-image. It's a very small percentage. So I felt kind of like depleted as a person, that all these things that I held on to near and dear to feel good about myself, if you will, were stricken away. And so I wanted to go heal and run away and escape the pain, and looking around at everything that's so familiar in Chicago and my parents' home that reminded me of her. The way she smelled and laughed and sounded and looked, and everything was just this big blazing reminder of her not being there. And so I departed to South America, bought a one-way ticket, and started making my way with a friend through South America, volunteering. We were teaching children like self-defense and martial arts and English and chess, and women who are abused, making our way through Bolivia and burn units and for children in hospitals, and teaching women of abuse how to defend themselves against their drunken husbands, like going and doing all this kind of very severe, extreme volunteering while also experiencing this kind of adventurous road trip of making our way through all these South American countries. And all the while, Jess was with me. She was showing up in dreams and guiding me. And I was finished about reading that book, The Afterlife of Billy Fingers. And so I had a sense of like kind of what's going on, because she wanted me to read that book, and she's communicating with me, but like kind of in a different way than Billy was with his sister. She would come and give a lot of like synchronicity of signs, butterflies, animals visiting, but like messages from people or events or experiences, these coincidental things that would ignite within me at that moment of them happening, this understanding that this was from her, and this emotional response that I felt that she was there with me in some capacity. And my mind knew she wasn't here on earth as a living human, but that it also knew that she wasn't dead. Not in the concept that I had learned of life and death as a child being raised in a Catholic school, that her soul was somewhere else and she was good, because all the energies, all the messages that the medium was constantly talking to me almost every single week for free, just loving me and helping and guiding me through this extremely challenging season. And she was just concentrating on Joe doing better, Joe finding his way, Joe being, knowing that she's still okay and loved and she's with him. So I knew that wherever she was gravy. She was in a really good space. I was the one who was screwed. I was the one who was just entombed in suffering and grief. And so I was making sense of all of this while traveling through South America. And I was giving and spiritually, emotionally, mentally depleted. And then physically, I got sick in Bolivia and I just couldn't take it anymore. And I was having the bad thoughts, the real bad thoughts where you're like, I don't want to kill myself, but I don't want to live. So I want to die. I don't want to do it, and I'm sick of this life. And so I was having these really horrible thoughts. And I kind of knew that this is the point of no return. I'm either going A or B. What does B look like? B looks like I have to reinvent myself completely, starting from zero. Like this current path is just not sustainable. And so I went back to Chicago for a little bit and then basically moved to Costa Rica. We were married in Costa Rica. So I wanted to go live there. And I had savings in the bank. We were trying to buy a house in the future. And again, like traveling through South America and Central America is probably 1/10 what I was paying in Chicago. So it wasn't like I was living some luxurious lifestyle. You're going to hostels and you're taking buses throughout countries. It's not luxurious, but it was amazing and adventurous because it also was an escape from Chicago and the grief there. So I eventually moved back to Costa Rica, but cool story here is when I was in Chicago, I didn't tell anybody because I kind of felt like I failed because I wanted to be on this like year-long mission of like traveling and volunteering. And I came back like 3 months later or something. And so I didn't tell many people. And I was meeting a family member for lunch one day, and I'm walking down Chicago, and it is in December, like the mid December. So the wind is ripping by, and I just got back traveling. All my stuff's in storage, so I didn't have like earmuffs or proper protection. I'm just walking down the street. My ears feel like they're going to be ripped off my head with the wind, and it's 9 degrees out or something. So I finally make it to the cafe that I'm meeting my friend at lunch. She's late. And I sit down and I get a message from Tanya, the medium. And all it said was, Jessica told me to tell you to cover your ears. And it was such a magical moment because, you have that earthly wife husband bond, like, honey, don't forget to take out the garbage and don't forget your coat, and she was still my wife in the beyond of like, take care of yourself. And I had already decided that I was going to be moving to Costa Rica after the new year. So like, whatever it was, 10 days from that date or something, I knew I didn't need earmuffs in Costa Rica, 85 and sunny. So I went and bought them anyway. Because when your wife tells you to do something like that, you listen. And so it was just like another confirmation of this kind of understanding, this realization that was settling in for me. So I eventually moved to Costa Rica, and I concentrated wholly on my own mindset and perspective. I started reading a lot of religious, spiritual, and self-help books while meditating deeply and taking care of myself physically. Because I learned in Bolivia, if you're not physically well, you can't really work on your mindset and spiritual and emotional regulation and all that. So I was swimming and working out and eating well and just, basking in the sun and doing all the stuff that you would do in Costa Rica, and trying to balance that with sometimes falling off the wagon and getting blackout drunk because you want to, make the pain go away. So still grief was an insurmountable thing, but I was starting to make some progress understanding my mindset and perspective. And I would continue reading other books, and another book I came across was Many Lives, Many Masters. And I learned about this book actually when I was decided to leave Costa Rica and drive a old Land Rover, a 1971 Land Rover that I bought in Costa Rica for very cheap, all the way back to Chicago. So I was going to take this safari vehicle through all these different countries, like 10,000 or 15,000 kilometers, all the way to Chicago. And it took 4 months, about crazy adventures, would break down all the time. But I met a lot of people and was still getting this spiritual love from Jess coming to me in dreams and giving me like really beautiful messages, like profound, direct messages on like what to do, what not to do in some cases, and a lot of synchronicities. And I would kind of like just go and like let go and like let what I thought was her guide me. So like, where am I going to go? This country or this? And I would just feel it emotionally, like this pull, and then that's the way I would go. So I started learning how to live like based on your heart spiritually there, and getting out of the fear-based ego and letting go and just knowing I was going to be okay. Because everybody was like, you're going to drive through all of Central America, Honduras and El Salvador and then Mexico by yourself, the little gringo in this old car that is 70 years old or whatever. And we're terrified. Like, what are you thinking? There's all these crazy groups out there and all this trouble. And I avoided pretty much all of it. And then again, I was in Nicaragua, and this gal that I befriended was like, have you read Many Lives, Many Masters? And so I'm like, no. She's like, that book changed my life. And that's basically about a psychologist who takes a client through hypnosis. And through their journey together, she's got all of these different anxieties and deep-seated insecurities and phobias. She kind of explores the subconsciousness and reveals to him past lives that she experienced. And so he's, this analytical scientist and doctor is like, this doesn't make sense, but he kind of went with it. And so he catalogs their experience together, and he sees that she lived many lives, and that he not only got to see her previous lives, but also the life between lives, different like beings and entities that were like kind of spiritual guides or mentors for her that were allowing him to be a part of this process. And all the while, her kind of opening up about these past lives was healing in her actual life now. So it's a phenomenal book, Many Lives, Many Masters by Brian Weiss. And so I read that and I'm like, this is crazy fascinating. And so I started getting into more so like near death experiences and past life regression. And then I finally made it to Chicago. And on the way I got to back up a little bit. I was in Mexico one day and I'm going throughout my life and I am doing all these crazy epic adventures, feeling like I'm living multiple lives because I've go live in, El Salvador for a few weeks and then, was in Colombia and then Mexico. And I'm learning all these things and gorging on these spiritual books. And I was waiting for the rains to subside because my car was so old that if it rained, it was like a leaky submarine, like water's coming in everywhere and everything. And so like, I didn't want to be driving through all the terrain and everything with that happening. So I'm just laying in bed. It was like 5 o'clock in the morning, waiting for the rain to subside. And I had this epiphany of the book that I was meant to write, because that was Jessica's first message. And so I thought of the very first chapter and the very last chapter. And it was like this eureka moment. I remember like crying and like celebrating that euphoria that day as I was making my way through the Mexican coast somewhere off the Pacific. And I knew that this is the story that I'm meant to tell. This was the book that I'm meant to write. And so I eventually made it back to Chicago. And then I learned about another book called Journey of Souls, where Michael Newton takes a bunch of people, like hundreds of people, through what's called a past life regression, where they're able to access their past lives and access how they died in previous lives and the lessons they learned. And not only that, like what happens after death. And he cataloged all their experiences and kind of mapped out the afterlife and the soul's purpose for coming to earth. It's a lot of people say it's like for school, but it's not really to learn lessons, but rather to gain from experience. Coming to this earthly realm, we're gaining experience. So we're evolving through duality, gaining everything from black to white, sweet to bitter, and knowing what that's like in all different circumstances. And it kind of coincides with, certain spiritual and esoteric regards of theories that, God basically divided God's self into infinite realities and beings so it could experience itself to the fullest extent. And so that's kind of like the soul is this micro chemistry set where we're out there doing all that, experiencing everything to see how we would react. And so basically through our lives, we go all the way through this crazy evolution and other lives on other planets even until we return to our divine nature of God. So he maps out this crazy world that I was like, this is fascinating. So I started meditating even deeper, doing transcendental meditation twice a day, 20 minutes, really trying to just conquer my thinking mind so I could access more of that subconscious state. And then I set a meeting with a person who does a past life regression who was trained by Michael Newton outside of Chicago. And so I'm just like going up to this appointment. I'm still grieving hardcore. It's, hasn't even been a year yet since she passed. And I was journaling and writing a lot, sharing a lot of that on Facebook and trying to do the best I could and learning this stuff. But I was still very much in the grasp of grief and lamentation. And so I went on this meeting and she's like, well, what brings you here? I'm like, I want to know if I had a past life with my late wife. Like, that's it. And she's like, okay, let's get to it. And she takes me through the process. Basically, you just sit in a chair and she gets you into a trance-like state. And before, when you were thinking of like hypnosis and trance, you always think of like people like in that zombie state where they're like, give me your credit card number and social security. And you're like, here, 3, 2, 6, 4. And it's not like that. you're very, very cognizant of what's going on, but you're so peaceful, so relaxed, and you could just feel that kind of brain activity just simmer and settle down into this like very profound, kind of stable, but very dense state. And so you're almost going and searching back for like things that were lost and within you, and they're there in this void. And so she takes me back, and then you go through the process. And then she's like, okay, you're standing under the tree of protection, and we're going to cross this bridge. When you step off the bridge, you're going right into the life that you shared with your late wife. So I step off this bridge and I'm seeing this stuff, almost kind of like if you ever seen that Claritin commercial where everything's like kind of foggy, but then they peel back that little plastic screen and everything becomes very clear. It's kind of like that stuff would just clarify for me as I'm looking at it. And so I step off the bridge and I look down at this little brown foot, and I see this little brown foot, and I see this long black hair, and I thought I was a Native American girl. I was a Native American boy. And I'm looking around and I'm like, this is so trippy and wild. Like in the subconscious state, I'm like, holy cow, this is crazy. Like I'm this little American, Native American child. And you're kind of like slipping out because it's like recalling a memory, but like with better, vivid detail and description. And so I'm there and I'm just a little kid, and she kind of is like the remote control. She'll be like, well, fast forward to the next significant event in this life. So we fast forward and I'm clutching my mom looking up at this tree, and this man is hanging from a noose. Okay. So this is like the first real experience I'm seeing in my past life. And that man was my father, and I could hear the noose creak, and I could feel my anger, my rage, and my loathing, but also like my extreme sadness because somebody murdered my father. And we were in this Native American setting environment where we were being chased out already. So it was in the latter years where basically, Trail of Tears kind of environment. And so we were being hunted down and moved out and kind of, genocide in a sense, not a sense, but that's exactly what happened. And so that's the lights that I was recalling. And so then she would be like, what's the next significant event, and move forward. And if she didn't say that, sometimes I would just sit there and recall where I was like whittling, where I would have a knife or a blade, and I was like making something on wood. And that was important. The reason I'm bringing that up is because the whole time I'm asking myself, are you making this up? Like, are you crafting this live just from your, I don't know, deep genius, creative genius that's down there in order to come to terms with grief? And the answer was kind of proven in multiple ways. One, because I would feel the emotion of the character I was, this Native American boy and then man. I would feel the natural, authentic emotion when he was experiencing stuff, including battle and killing somebody and losing loved ones and being hunted and so mad and angry at the circumstance. So the emotion that I felt was like, I feel like, how can I just naturally conjure this up like that? It was just so authentic, as if I was experiencing it for the first time. And then two, I don't think I would have been clever enough to be like, I'm whittling. I'm doing nothing. I'm using the bathroom. Like, because life as a soul, everything is a divine moment and experience. We give it importance. Certain experiences we give importance over others. But if she wasn't there to be the remote control, the woman guiding me, I was just sitting there like whittling, and I'm just like, this isn't anything. But it signified to me that you're not creating this live, because I don't think you would have done that. You would have thought to do that. You would have only like had the big montage of big, exciting and, challenging experiences, life experiences. So I was simultaneously trying to prove myself that you're not crazy. This is really happening. Just go with it. And the scenes kept unfolding. And eventually we go to this life event where we're all gathering, like all the tribes are gathering to kind of like come together and figure out what to do here. And I was a grown man, and I walk into a tent and I see Jess, my late wife. I see her as a Native American, but her face from the life today, or this life here now, Jessica Marie Hehn, it kind of imprinted over the Native American. So I could see her face printed over, and that's how I know it's her. It's like you almost see like where it's like you see the soul beyond the flesh. And the way I recognized that was Jessica Marie from being my wife here. And so I was like, oh my God, Jess is my wife in this life. Like we're married and we have kids. And then we had a few kids and we scanned one of the kids, and this old, like toothless Native American, real old, like the real caked on like face of wrinkles and real brown, kind of leathery. And I look over and it's my mom from this life. I go, oh my gosh, my mom is like my great grandmother or something. This woman's so old, she's probably like great grandmother, and I just knew that that was a grandmother to me, or a great grandmother. And she was holding one of the kids. And it was just so mind blowing because I don't think I would have known to incorporate somebody else beyond Jess into this life. And so then, we had a few kids, and we fast forward, and we're at this celebration, this like dinner where we're all just together eating this feast. And I look over and somebody throws something at me as the Native American. I get hit by like with a chicken bone or something. And I look over and it's one of my best friends from this life. And his face is all smiling because he's like kind of messing with me. And I'm just like, oh my God, Ryan. We're like, oh, Ryan is one of my best friends. He was in this life too. And so it was like just wild to see this. So we fast forward life a little bit more. And all of a sudden we're sitting out by this big fire, community fire. And I'm laying down and my head is in Jessica's lap. And the kids are there sleeping around us. We have the two kids. And so we're sitting there and like the stars are above us. You're hearing the sounds of nature, the fire and the crackle and the embers floating up into the heavens. And it's just a brilliant setting. And we just fall asleep out there because we're just sleeping outside. And I wake at dusk. And this is where it got a little weird for me because my perspective changed from being me, being the Native American, like sleeping on Jessica's lap, to all of a sudden I was stalking through a forest. And there was like forest, but I could clearly see through the trees, the big fire was just the embers kind of going up. And all these Native Americans were around and sleeping. And I looked down and like I had a gun in my hand and I was not Native American. And then it flashed back to me being the Native American laying on Jessica's lap. And all of a sudden I'm up and I feel that something is wrong. And then I look to around the area and I see that people are sneaking up through this wooded area. We're in kind of a clearing here and probably like 50 or 100 yards, 50 yards away or whatever, the wood line kind of starts, the forest. And I see people sneaking up and I stand up and I grab whatever the weapon was, I believe like a tomahawk. And so I grab that and I look to Jess because she's getting up. People are alerted. People are kind of starting to stir and move around because I think they sense it too. And I look to her and I go, run. And I just remember, I still get chills thinking about it because it was such a like run and get out of here. And then I turned back and I ran towards the tree line. And as I run towards the tree line, this guy steps out, takes the gun to aim, and I throw the tomahawk and take him out. And I take him out and I get up to where he is and I remove the tomahawk and I didn't search the forest line right away. And I looked back to make sure Jess was running and I could still like see the image in my head. She had one of the kids in her arm and another one in their hand and she was just running away. And I see them just tearing ass out of here. Sorry for swearing. And so she took off and then I turn around to go basically take on the next target. And I felt this opening in my head, just this like release, this air, this like opening. And all of a sudden I was just floating above my body. And in the experience, the past life regression, I was like, no, wait, hold on. Like, I'm not ready. I was just trying to be like, stop, time, pause. And it was just like, no, you're doing this. And basically then I got whipped up into the heaven. Basically I was shot in my head and I died as that Native American. And so then my soul went up and then it went to where I kind of saw a montage of Jessica where she was grieving tremendously, like on her hands and knees crying. These people were like doing the Trail of Tears. They were being like hunted and moving, and she was with the kids and just so beaten and battered with grief and hardship. And so I felt like I was a cloud. Like the way I was like this presence of this entity that was above her. And it felt like I was kind of like a cloud watching over her, like I was part of the heavens. And I saw other Native Americans watching over their families too. And I would be able to send her messages and signs and like butterflies and give her encouragement. And it kind of like went really fast, like almost like, the high speed video of showing her life and growing and the kids getting older and stuff. And it went to this future time where she was gardening. And I don't know, it seemed like, I don't know why, but it seemed like 8 years later, and she's gardening and she's smiling and she's happy. It makes me emotional now because like it reflects what was happening to me and her guiding me in that moment and through my journey. And eventually she got to this like place of healing and the kids were like grown up and doing their own thing. And so it like kind of ended there. And then all of a sudden, poof, I'm on a ship and I'm wearing like this weird costume, this white thing, and I'm on making notes in this ledger and I'm walking down this ship. And so I go to the past life regressions. I'm like, now I'm on a ship. Oh my God, this is wild. And I'm like starting to do this and we're like counting inventory or something. And she's like, well, that's all the time we have right now, because it was like a 2.5 hour experience of me going through this entire thing. So then I left that building. I could have flown away. I could have just like fluttered off into the ether and just dissolved back into consciousness and been so happy. I was so light. And I felt like almost like I left an exoskeleton of grief and suffering and despair back in that room because I recognized that this life is not the only life, that Jessica, she's gone, but this was a chapter in a book, not the end all be all. And so then I ran home and replicated the entire process to myself, being pretty savvy with meditation. I started for memory, verbatim, walking myself through the exact trance-like kind of steps to access the subconscious state. And for 3 to 4 days, I started sifting through my past lives, going all the way back and then seeing different lives, being a caveman, like taking something from somebody else because I wanted it and killing that person because I wanted the thing that they had, like no remorse, like, holy cow. And then, being a jewel thief in the Middle East somewhere and getting kind of hanged and in prison and then hanged in the streets and being like a Quaker farmer. And all these lives are like just coming to me. And Jess was in a lot of them, but also other people, other friends. And so I started to recognize that I have this like soul group that we would reincarnate together. And they kind of confirm that in Michael Newton's book. They do, that you have this soul group. And so I was seeing that a lot of those friends were with me now. And so then I said, well, if I could see the past, can I see the future of this life? Like, what am I allowed here? And so then I took a sneak peek into the future and I did it from start because you go from like the moment you're born and then you go to the present and then beyond. And so I started off as a kid and, went through my whole life. And then I was speaking on stage and I was signing books and I was speaking in front of lots and lots of people, like empowering them, teaching whatever. I didn't know what, but that was my future. And it didn't really make a lot of sense. The book maybe a little bit because it was like, maybe I'm talking about the book or whatever, but I had that idea to write the book, my novel, which I decided was going to be called Dreams of Antiquity. And so then I come home from that and I'm still in Chicago, my parents' house, suburbs there. And I'm like, I don't want to be here, but now I know this stuff. And now I want to really write this book. So I went and moved to Italy, the Amalfi Coast, and found a little apartment and went and started writing Dreams of Antiquity. And then I just kind of kept doing that where I would go take these big trips to other places, writing different chapters of my book, Dreams of Antiquity, while trekking Nepal and studying Buddhism in Nepal and visiting Tibet and staying there for a while. And then going and studying Hinduism and self realization while touring India and studying Sufism while going to the Middle East and the Sahara and Christianity in Italy. And I was just making my way around, going to China and studying Confucianism and Taoism. And I would learn all these lessons because I was just like so absorbed with my mind, a perspective and spiritual life now that I felt like I was living these lives in these different countries, which coincided with me like having access to my subconsciousness and going through the lives there. And so I was making my way around the world and then kind of said, I need to be back in the States and somewhere stable. And so I moved to San Diego and I just packed up whatever belongings I could put in my car and drove all the way out and found a little apartment in Del Mar and would always get these signs still from Jess, years afterwards of like how to make the decision, feeling that energy with making a decision about which apartment to get. Like you just go into an experience and it's either dark and gloomy and heavy or light and abundant and like encouraging. And so I just learned how to live that spiritual life and then understand the ego and learning all about my mind and perspective. And so then I was living there and doing this stuff and I ran out of money, basically, going off savings, doing all these adventures. And I was like, I got to start earning money if I'm going to stay out in San Diego. So I got a job consulting with medical devices for dental offices. And it was great because I got to travel all over United States and help people. I did all right financially. And then I basically ran my own business. And so I would still go on these trips and go do these things where I'd take these big trips and everything. But I started recognizing that I'm growing and healing so much that I'm starting to kind of reflect how Jess was gardening and finding the peace and the purpose. And so I started coaching other people, just friends and family members who were going through hard times because life is suffering and it's all a matter of grief. And the pain is just layered depending on what you're suffering through. Grief being one of the hardest things to kind of absorb and make your way through. So I started coaching people on everything that I had learned and all of my, self-made mastery of my mind. And they would make progress and heal and grow and all this stuff. And people would come to me because Jess came to them in a dream and and told them to talk to me. And I ended up coaching them and helping them and saving them in a way where they were released from their suffering. And so I started making a lot of momentum there. And I started recognizing that like I've got a lot of life to live. I'm, you know, 38 years old and I am still a young man and maybe I want love again. And so then I started learning all about the law of attraction. I was going back to Costa Rica just for a trip. I was getting a lot of encouragement to go there. I was actually going to go to Argentina and go trek in Patagonia. And then I sit down on a plane on a business trip one time, and this guy is sitting next to me. He's got two kids way over his head, and I help him out, and we get to talking. And he got married in Costa Rica at the exact same hotel that a resort that Jess and I got married at. And, we're talking about Pura Vida and the tattoos and all the stuff that I have. And I was just like, man, this is wild that this is happening. It was like my sign to go to Costa Rica. And so I go, all right, I'm just going to go there. I start to pack a bag and I got a stack of books. What book am I going to read next? Right. And I look and I pull one going through them and one just shines. One just kind of glows. I was like, yeah, this is it. And it was Abraham Hicks, the law of attraction. So it was Jerry and Esther Hicks. And I take this book and I go to Costa Rica and I start reading these messages and I am getting like pummeled with waves of energy. Like, this is it, Joe. Like, this is your level up. And I was working for that medical device company. And I came back from Costa Rica with all these new messages and just kind of almost becoming obsessed with like, holy cow, I've never used my consciousness to create. I was of the Zen mind, like the Buddhist mind, where everything just was, and would try to have no attachment to releasing desire and just having this very peaceful experience, which was beautiful and profound. But as a salesperson, you're, I would be like, if I go in there and sell this person, it's wonderful. If I don't, it's wonderful. Like I'm okay regardless. It doesn't help your results a ton, but it helps your quality of life. So I had to develop this foundation of like Zen mind, not attachment, very peaceful and present. And it made a tremendous amount of work there, and it really served me. But then I learned that you can take your consciousness and use it in a certain way to create a certain experience that you want for yourself. So I come back and I go, well, let's see, where am I at for the year? And I was entering Q4, the fourth quarter, and I had about $500,000 in sales and I needed to have 1.5. So I was down $1 million and I only had one quarter, and I kind of blew through already 3 quarters of the year. So I had a lofty goal, but I started implementing everything that they had taught, and I hit $1.6 million by the end of the year. So in the 3 months, I did $1.1 million in sales. And I go, okay, there's something here to this. Is one, you have to kind of heal yourself, get to that Zen mind, and then you can start laser focusing your consciousness to create. And so then I started saying, can I do this with love? I want to be a loving man. I want to be a father eventually. I want to be a husband again. And so I started focusing my consciousness there, and just still coming in dreams, guiding me, not as frequent, but as profound with the actual experiences. I would even feel like she would come and like hug me from behind sometimes. I would be at like a friend's wedding and thinking of her and longing for her to be there. And this friend, is getting married, and they were introduced at my um at like one of my birthday parties that Jessica threw. So it was just like, you're still suffering bouts of grief. And I felt like she would come and like hug me from behind. I'd feel this spiritual, like energetic, like embrace, wrap her arms around me and just feel that comfort. And so I felt like that she was still continuing to guide me. But then I wanted to know love again here, as a human. And so I started doing all that and then going on dates. And you kind of learn as a widower going on dates, entering your 40th year almost. It's fun, right? It's very humbling. And I was a bartender when I was dating back in the day. I would just smile and serve a gal a drink if I liked her, and that would be great. That's all I needed to do. And now you're on Bumble or something, and you're exchanging information and you're shopping for people. And it was such a crazy world, but I would go on dates and just still be very spiritual and tell people, yeah, I'm writing a novel about her. I've this, and for some people, it was the worst thing ever and you need a lot of help. And some people were empowered by it and attracted to it. And so I learned about myself and learned how to show up. And then eventually I walked into a dental office one day, and I remember looking up at this woman, and she was sitting behind the front desk, and I just went, oh, wow. And the only time I've ever had that reaction and said that was when I saw Jess walking down the aisle in Costa Rica, down these white stairs. I was trying to get the ring out of the pillow, and I looked up and she was just there because she was running late and I was sweaty and hot, and look up and it was like, oh, wow, like soul stirring, humbled. And I walk into the dental office and that same thing happened. And I had to have a whole presentation with the team and teach them all about this laser that the guy bought, and I befriended the owner. And so then I left and I was like, hey man, this is really weird. I don't do this. I promise you I'm not that guy. But like, I just felt a good connection with Susie. Like, can I have her number? And so he asked the office manager to get her number, this, that, and the other. And then she said no. She's like, this guy lives in San Diego. We're in Sacramento. He's friends with my boss. Absolutely not. But eventually the team kind of like peer pressured her into she's like, it's just a number. So we got to talking and we started talking for a while, and it was my 40th birthday. And then we finally decided, like, let's hang out. She comes to San Diego and we spend time together, we recognize that I have a tattoo of a compass. If you could see this here a little bit, but it's on my arm there. This is the first tattoo I got with Jess. And it's a compass, and on the top it says love. And this woman, Susie, had the exact same compass, almost verbatim, on her rib cage when we met for the first time. And it was another synchronicity that something is here. And so things developed there, and we gained a lot of momentum. And then eventually she moved in, and we worked on ourselves because she had a really hard relationship where she had to flee and restraining order and go through a divorce because she was abused in so many ways. And I'm this widower writing a book about my late wife. And so we had a lot of baggage coming into this, but like we were both broken beyond repair, and then we were being fixed, and I had more time than she did to kind of do that. So it was really, really magical. And before, when I went through my conscious and subconsciousness was accessing my future, there was a scene. Beyond signing books and speaking on stage, I was in my parents' driveway, and I was sitting outside, and there was two little kids running around, and this woman with this just kind of darker hair, brown hair, and her face was blurred. But I knew that she was my wife, and those were my children. And so I knew that was in my future. And so eventually things got serious with Susie, and I went back to that meditation, and I was rusty, and I was like, all right, you got to go through this, trying to access the future life. And I go back, and I'm able to access that exact memory or future memory experience. And the veil of the blurriness is brought down, and it is Susie, that she is. And I knew, like, this is my new soulmate for this life. And so we had a lot of life thrown at us, where we came in and we got pregnant, and we had unfortunately lost that baby. And then we moved to Illinois. My father was in hospice, and I helped him spiritually transition, telling him all this stuff, sharing with him what the afterlife is, and that we're this soul reincarnated, choosing this life, learning from it, growing from it. We're always going to be with our loved ones. And he was a Vietnam vet and didn't really have any understanding of life and death, but he was terrified. And I was able to get my father to a place of peace by expanding on my entire journey. And then we moved into a house in Illinois and had a baby, little Oliver Holden, in January of 2022, and didn't love Illinois. I was taking Susie, who was from NorCal and lived in Southern California with me and Scottsdale before that, and bring her into a Midwestern winter, which is basically, a prison. And so she was not about it. And I was right there with her. I was like, I live in Southern California. Like, that is the lifestyle. And so we moved back. And just before that, I published my book, Dreams of Antiquity, which I'll talk about after I take a breath. This right now, I've been going nuts, but retelling the whole entire story. But that is it in a nutshell. And then now I am full-time coaching other people. So I teach other people mindset. The higher perspective is my program. And I teach corporations with teams because I'm bringing spirituality to people who don't know they need it yet. And through mindset techniques and applications and religious and spiritual techniques and methodologies and theories and everything. And so I teach, I speak, I write books, and I do all that professionally now because I've manifested that for myself. So I have my own business. Oliver, little man, is 2.5 years old and running around, and just this beautiful little ball of radiant, soulful energy and love. Susie and I are really, really strong, and we're getting married in November. So lots of abundance is happening, and it's not happenstance. It's very much intentional, but I had to learn all this. And now this is what I teach other people, is how to transform your entire life by using your consciousness and through these soulful, spiritual, mental kind of techniques and theories. Yeah.
Joe, this was mind blowing. What an amazing transformation. You're
Thank you.
such an inspiration to take something so devastating that breaks a lot of people permanently. They can never recover and turn it into this beautiful, amazing, blessed life. You're
Thank you.
an inspiration for real. And I hope
Thank you
that
so much.
anyone that is struggling with loss or anything related can take away from your story that it's not the end, that there's
Yeah.
still life waiting for you on the other side, and that it's okay to go through difficult times. And that's what it's all about is
Yeah.
overcoming and becoming who you're supposed to be. If my audience wanted to reach out to you to purchase your book, how can they find you? And tell me a little bit more about your book as well.
Sure. So my website has all my information. I have a YouTube channel where I teach a lot of the different principles of what I've just explained, like how to do that yourself, soulful stuff, but a lot of manifestation, law of attraction, but like mindset techniques, mastering ego, meditation, all that. So you can check out Joe Hehn, Hehn on YouTube, and then my website too. And then you can access Amazon or Barnes and Nobles to buy Dreams of Antiquity, The Awakening. And so there, I also do like one-on-one coaching. And if you work for a corporation or a bigger company and you want like team coaching to help improve the quality of performance, but more so like the quality of experience, where people are showing up and having this like almost spiritual recognition, this really higher perspective recognition to help just improve them and their ability to like manage stress, anxiety, heighten performance, and just have a more loving personal experience at work. So that's what I do. I'm working with some bigger corporations, Salesforce and eBay, and really cool stuff. But the book you can get at my website. You can email me there as well. All my information's there, and I'm sure Tia will share that on like the screen or something or in the details. But Dreams of Antiquity is I'm actually rewriting a bit of it. So if you wait a little bit, it's going to be relaunched, and I think it's going to be much better. But I highly encourage you to check it out. Just super cool story, I think, and I've got to think that, I guess, right, because I'm creating it. But it's about a king and a queen in Babylon, and the queen gets very, very sick, and the king can't live without her. Gracian is the king, and Iadana is the queen, and so she passes away, and he can't stay in his life, so he tries to escape his life, but basically he passes away too. But then his soul reincarnates into a new life in Aboriginal circumstance, and he's this woman there trying to make uh, understanding of what his life is. And so he goes and lives as that person. That soul is reincarnated into this body, into this life and circumstance, completely different culture and faith and everything. But his wife, Iadana, is guiding him, and he's able to recall his past life as the king of Babylon. And then he goes through that life and ends up passing away, only to reincarnate in Egypt as an orphan. And then he has a vagabond of other orphans, and he goes through that whole life trying to make sense and learning from certain messages there. And that kind of continues on, that this soul reincarnates into Nepal as a shepherd, into China as a martial artist. And each life is its own circumstance. And he's relying on the culture and the faithful teachings of Taoism or Sufism or Buddhism to learn to grow as his soul evolves through these lives. So it's going to be a series, and book one is launched, Dreams of Antiquity, The Awakening. And again, I think a month or two, maybe by the time this podcast comes out, the book will be updated and it will be just tenfold better, because I was missing this one thing, and it came to me in a meditation while I was sitting next to my son, trying to get him to go to sleep. And it just, this again, eureka moment. I'm adding a little bit of that to make it just that much better. So that was such a soulful project, and I get to work on that because I'm going to be writing book 2 and 3 as the years go on. And I'm really excited to share that story, because it, it was my life traveling the world, and then also accessing subconscious lives and recognizing that we are this soul incarnating time and time again, and we're not alone.
Mm,
So
we're not alone. I love that. And your book sounds fascinating. I look forward
thank you.
to
Thank you so much.
it.
Yeah, I'm really excited.
If you had one message that you wanted the audience to take away from your experiences, what would it be?
probably say something if you ask that question, and I'd answer differently every single time. But with now and me telling the story, is that I believe through and through that you are a soul and that you've chosen this life, and certain things in this life were meant to happen to you. And your response is what will give you that evolution of soul, of spirit, of mind, of heart. And so there are things where we have free will, and there are things that were predestined that you chose, knowing that you were what you were in for in a sense in this life. So knowing that this life was your choice, make the most of it because you made this decision for yourself so that you could catapult yourself into an even higher space. So do whatever you can to learn about self-awareness, self-love, higher perspective, to heal, to grow, to evolve, recognizing that you're never alone and that this is a chapter in a very, very long and beautiful story that is all yours. And so you can take that information and do with it what you will. But in this life, you really have unbridled opportunity to really experience an insane amount of abundance and love and joy and make a launch into that higher perspective, that higher soulful space. And if you ever need help, have questions, need clarity, direction, myself, and there are endless other people, Tia, too, that can help you out. You are not alone. You don't have to figure it out. There are a lot of resources and help here on earth as well as the beyond.
What a beautiful and profound message, and such an important one as well. Joe, this has been a blessing
Thank
for
you.
me. I've enjoyed it very much. Thank you so much for being my guest.
Thank you for having me. I wish you well, and thank you all for listening.
Thank you for being here. I just want to tell you how much I appreciate you being here and supporting my channel. If you haven't already subscribed, please consider subscribing if you enjoy near death experiences and other spiritually transformative stories. It helps the algorithm know that this information is useful and push it out to more people. And that's the goal, to get as many people to know that we are eternal spiritual beings and that we never die. Our bodies might die, but our essence will never die. And I want people to live with less fear. Let's all spread the word. Like, comment, subscribe, share, hit that little notification bell so you get all the notifications when my videos post. Thank you for all of your support. I'm sending love to you.